Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. This is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. And cars broke down, I missed the bus, there runs a 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right under Jumbo's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just a perfect day. It's just a perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey everybody, welcome back to Eggs. This week's guest is Jonathon Hensley. Jonathon is co-founder and CEO of Emerge, a digital product consulting firm that works with companies to improve operational agility and customer experience. For more than 2 decades, Jonathon has helped startups, Fortune 100 brands, technology leaders, large regional health networks, nonprofit organizations, and more transform their businesses by turning strategy, user needs, and new technologies into valuable digital products and services. Jonathon writes and speaks about his experience and insights from his career and regularly hosts in-depth interviews with business leaders and industry insiders. Here to talk about all that good stuff and so much more is our guest, Jonathon Hensley.
Hey, Jonathon.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Of course. Yeah. First off, I should probably stop doing this at some point, but we keep thanking everyone so much for their time during this crisis. It's just been such a crazy, hectic, and busy time for everybody who's come on recently that, we're really grateful and appreciative of your time and willingness to do the show.
Well, I appreciate that. And thank you guys for your time and for having me. It's a pleasure. And your time is just as valuable as mine.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So Jonathon, let's start a little bit at the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about who you are, where you come from, and how we got here.
Yeah. Oh, big question. So I started off getting into the digital product space a little over 20 years ago. Originally grew up in Silicon Valley in Palo Alto area. And I was just completely surrounded by all the amazing people and the technologies that were being developed at the time. And it was just really inspiring at a really young age to see how those technologies were starting to shape the way that people worked and the way that they lived their lives. And I just kind of, fell into that whole stream of, innovation and work that people were doing. And it just was absolutely enthralling to me and just jumped in and, head first and never looked back.
Okay. So, what got you into it? Did you go to school? Or are you self-taught? Or you, it's kind of...
Yeah. When I started off, it was kind of the Wild West. There wasn't really a lot of formal education for this type of work. The whole idea of design thinking was relatively, new. A lot of where technology was going with the internet didn't exist when I got into it. We were pretty much still old school days of software and building off of old school enterprise type technologies when I got in the mix. So most of it was self-taught. I was going to user groups as a kid, and I'd be one of the only kids there, and I'm trying to learn about how software works. And I'm heading down to the Hewlett Packard campus and starting to ask for parts so I can start building my own computers. And it started off with that, and then the next thing I know, I'm going to the University of Oregon and I'm in the computer science program. And, what I'm learning and working, doing, out helping businesses and what I'm learning in school was just a little bit disconnected, quite honestly. There was a lot of great fundamentals, but I found myself drawn to, getting out there in the real world and had some opportunities to jump in. So I actually left school halfway through and took on these opportunities at the advice of my professors. Said, school will always be here. Here's your opportunity. Go see what you can do. And then I ended up never going back. So
nice. I've heard very similar stories from a few other people that we've had on. Ryan Carson, CEO of Team Treehouse, is similar example.
Also, they're in Portland, by the way.
Yeah. You should link up with him sometime. He's a good dude.
I should.
So
So I think that's really great. One of the things that you mentioned in that little intro, though, and maybe it's something worthy of spending a little bit of time, because maybe it'll be a part of this conversation as we continue exploring digital product design, was this concept of design thinking. Now, it's interesting to me because I've just gotten kind of into this stuff, and I come from a creative side of the world. So I come from graphic design marketing. So when I think design thinking, I think design thinking, but it's a totally different thing. So I wondered if maybe you could just sort of give us some definitions, or sort of give us a high level thought of what design thinking is, so that we can frame the rest of our discussion around product design.
Yeah. So, I'm not going to frame it as well as, leaders of IDEO and so forth. But I think, in essence, design thinking is a systematic way of thinking about a problem. It's coming at a problem from an empathetic, human-centered approach to how we want to solve that problem. And I think it's a really powerful approach. Whereas, traditionally you might have a very business-centric or business-driven methodology or way of thinking, or you might have a very technically oriented engineering, mindset. But at the end of the day, all of these things are in the essence there to serve people. And so design thinking puts, people at the heart of how we think about problems and how we create value. And so I think that's really the important part of what design thinking does, is it gives us a structure and a way to think about the human component when we're designing products and services.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I like about it too is that it seems to actually help people get stuff done. Like, it's a methodology for working your way through a problem, from not only identifying these sort of soft, intangible things, like how will a human react when using my app or software or website or whatever it is you're working through. But I like that through its sort of structured and regimented processes, and I'm not sure, I'm probably conflating a few things here, but agile and sprint processes and things like this, it seems like these different methodologies that were sort of born in the software world are helping people to get more done today. So I think it's a really cool world that you're working in.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, design thinking. I think a lot of the critical thinking that's in it is not necessarily new. I think what it's found a new time is maybe a good way to think about it, because we went through an industrial era where the entire idea of modernizing and building a successful business was to break down everything into its most basic fundamental components, right? I needed somebody who can put 4 screws right here and do it 1,000 times a day. And that's how we're going to build all of these cars. We're not asking people to be creative problem solvers through that, era of history. And now what we come full circle and we realize, when we say people are our most valuable asset, we need to unleash their creativity. And so to unleash their creativity means we have to start with the human component, and we have to break away from that systematic approach of being task focused. And we need to get back to the foundation of what it means to be human and use these things, and how technology is meant to serve our humanity, not to replace it.
Yeah. One of the talking points on your one sheet that you sent us is alignment. And I'm assuming that's kind of down the same path as kind of what we're talking about right now. Can you kind of define why alignment's important and what it means in your business?
Yeah. So alignment is one of those things that through my career, it's always been, mission critical. And I think we can all relate to it in different ways, right? If we're working on a creative project with a team member, are we thinking about things the same way? When we say that we want to be customer focused, or that we understand a problem, are we actually thinking of it in the same way? Do we have the same understanding? What really has been interesting to me in the last couple of years is understanding a broader and deeper context of what alignment really is. So when I talk about alignment, what I'm really looking at is 4 different levels of alignment. So the first one is really individual alignment. And I think this really comes down to understanding, how does your work matter? How does my work and my individual contribution make a difference to the organization that I'm working in? How does the product and my skills, come to elevate the result? The second one is team alignment, which deals with how we align with others and we integrate multiple disciplines and our experiences and perspectives to, really come together and collaborate successfully to create something. And then the third one is organizational alignment, where the organization is aligned around building, products and services that reflect its mission, its values, and is aligned then to the fourth level, which is the market. Really, does it align with people's real needs? And is that something that can scale? And so we talk a lot about alignment kind of at a broad level of understanding, but we don't really usually unpack it and really dig into what all of these things are. And it becomes, mission critical to the success of projects and eventually the success of organizations.
Yeah. Can you maybe break down some of the practices or things that you do to kind of make sure everyone's aligned on the same way? Is there any tips or tricks that you use in your organization to kind of explore and make sure that people are kind of on the right page?
Oh, we could spend a couple hours on that, but I'll pick a couple. I think one of the most fundamental things that we see is, and this is, I think, really valuable whether you're a designer or you're a product manager or you're an engineer, is going in and that we all have a responsibility to help build a common language within our organization. So every industry, right, has their own terminology and acronyms for things. But as we come together to work on something, we really need to make sure that we have a common language and understanding of that language. So when we talk about, being customer centric or what it means to become customer centric, we need to have a shared understanding. By doing that, we can break down silos, we can increase their ability to collaborate, and we can spend more time creating solutions to the problems we're being asked to solve instead of situations we've all been in before. Like, well, we need to have another meeting because obviously what was produced didn't align with what the expectations were, or, we need to rework this because I don't think we're thinking about these things or talking about them in the same way. And usually those are symptoms of a common language that's missing in the team or within the organization. And that's a leadership function that we all have to have, right? Leaders are, they earn leadership. Management is really dictated by title only. So that's really important. We really look for that when we work with clients to say, do we have a foundation here of a common language and understanding that we can build from? Another one is addressing very specific areas. So lots of times, is everybody clear what all the flows are in their product, right? So if we talk about all the things that we want to think about, innovating the customer experience, or how do we make sure we're tracking the right metrics and performance of a product and designing really immersive experiences, we can know that if we understand our flows. And usually that knowledge management and that understanding of breaking things down is either siloed, living with just a handful of people, or again, it's undocumented in its entirety, and it's not really understood that what we're doing in design, or essentially is in solving that problem, is guiding through tasks and behavior. So if we can break that down and we can look at that, we can identify, really critical insights and information that help support the team being much more successful.
So before we get off alignment, I wanted to ask you, so how much alignment is enough to get started? So I just wonder, because one thing that a lot of people run into is this, and I even hate saying the phrase because it's kind of dumb, but the analysis paralysis thing. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course it's critical, if we're going to find product success, this must align, but can you know all the answers before you actually start rolling out? Or what level of alignment, or quote unquote alignment, is required to be able to move forward on a product?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think for me, what it comes down to is there has to be a strategic foundation. If you're going to build a product or service, that foundation has to be in place. If it's not in place, you are running risk of failure. And a lot of failure is not, people talk about failure because of lack of market fit all the time. That wouldn't probably be a good use of time to really dig into. What a lot of failure, though, really comes from is internal sabotage. And so this idea of internal sabotage has been really important from my perspective in the work that we do, because we've seen so many clients be successful and so many struggle over 20 plus years of doing this type of work, and usually what is missing is that foundation. And that foundation needs to start with not falling in love with an idea or a solution before they really understand and diagnose the problem. What's the impact of that problem? And it's common, as an example, where goals are confused as strategy, right? We want to grow 20% year over year over year, and when we get there, it's going to look like this. That's not strategy at all. That's a vision. And it's great to have a vision and to have a destination, but that has no foundation in strategy. Strategy needs to tie to that. We need to know what we're trying to get towards what that destination looks like, but that's not strategy, right? Strategy is understanding and diagnosing the problem. Why does that problem exist? Is that because the organization has gotten really big and they're been successful and the way they used to do it no longer applies? And it's kind of, it's developed over time. Is there a hole in the market? Is there a new way of thinking and innovation, new technologies that have made it possible? It's like, the iPod wasn't even a possibility until, Toshiba came out with micro drives. One technology innovation led to the opportunity for another. And so being able to understand the problem and the opportunity is really important to, I think, being able to work effectively. The second piece to that is really understanding what's the outcome you want for your business and your users. If you can't understand the problem, understand the outcome, it's very difficult to define an approach that will lead you towards success. Yeah, and that's usually where execution fails.
Yeah, it's interesting because there are so many, businesses, organizations, products that are developed, everything, where that strategic step is missed entirely. And I mean, that stuff is called foundational because it is, in fact, foundational. You must build everything on top of it. And so it's interesting how many people will just skirt right by that stuff because it seems easier or more fun or whatever to get into the next step. But yeah, it's true, that foundational thing. And it's the same with any learning or anything, right? I mean, you've got to do the small steps first so that you can later take the big steps. So, but you just alluded to something I wanted to talk about too, as an extension of this idea and having that product strategy, is this idea of this execution gap. And I think that that's something that I was talking about at the beginning there, where I sort of feel like design thinking helps people get things done and maybe cures some of that gap. I know a lot of people, that have built websites or done, design projects or whatever, where, they don't really, they didn't lead with any kind of strategy. So it makes it pretty easy to fail down the road. And then eventually some of these things will just kind of fizzle and die. They're incapable of being executed. And so I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about that, or just sort of expand on your comments about the importance of strategy as it pertains to filling that execution gap.
Yeah, well, I think, kind of a fundamental thing is, earlier on you talked about, Agile as an example, and these types of things and methodologies that have been developed through software to help, produce, better outcomes and better products and services. And, Agile is one of those things, again, that is really misunderstood. It's like you don't just jump in and start developing things with Agile. You actually have the foundation of a strategy, and then you start to, work incrementally and iterate. Same idea with Google design sprints. I love that creative process. It's really wonderful, but they're not skipping any steps. What they're doing is they're trying to create faster cycles. So what happens a lot in execution is, there's this, when it does fail, it's because they're trying to skip steps. And when you start skipping those steps, you start to stumble as you go further and further down the path. So when we look at a foundation of strategy, we're doing a couple of really important things. We're developing and diagnosing the problem. We're setting that destination, that vision that we talked about, that's really important. And then the solution is not how do we get from, where we are today, to where we want to be 3 years from now. It's what's the first step to getting there? How do we move forward? So, making these quantum leaps is usually where I see a lot of, execution, failure happen, because the resources, the time, the insight doesn't exist yet to make that quantum leap for the organization, or the organization is not set up to support it at all. So they might develop a great product, but then, where's the marketing? Where's the, continuous improvement and process with the customer? Where did they actually build the channels out to be able to sell and build the awareness around the product? I mean, all these things are, intricately linked. And so you start to see those things fall apart if the foundation's not there. this is not a new concept, but the idea of like, okay, if I look at, what's happening and I can say, okay, here's where we are today and here's where we want to be in 3 years. And what's that, MVP look like, or that first iteration, then I'm going through a much more realistic, pragmatic approach to how much of this problem needs to be solved and how does it move us forward. We look at, examples that are out in the market, whether it be Apple or Google or lots of other companies, but I'm picking big ones that everybody knows. The evolution of these products is not transformational, they're incremental. And in those capabilities, as technology gets better, they're able to provide more and more value. And just like the Tesla, right? It's not really a car, it's a software platform on wheels. They can release new software all the time and it unlocks new capabilities in the vehicle. Well, that's a transformational way of thinking about a car, but it's incremental improvement.
Yeah. I'm actually guilty of being this guy that tries to take on the whole project at once instead of defining an MVP, figuring out what's the minimal amount that you have to get done, and then going from there. I actually tried to develop a software platform that would help with the booking process for mobile DJs and help with the networking for it, because there's maybe one or two out there and they're antiquated and they're horrible. And so I spent a year and a half of my life or more, A, learning how to code, B, trying to design the front end myself before having the back end. And I built this whole, non-functioning HTML layout with Bootstrap, trying to figure out what the workflow is instead of doing it on paper. I spent 6 months trying to hard code it myself, figuring, well, the next part, I'll add the database and I'll do this. And then it ended up being this huge, overwhelming task for one person. And pretty much I feel like I just wasted 2 years of my life trying to accomplish that. And so as we're having this conversation, it's like, duh, it's like, I wish I would have known this 3 years ago. But,
so I want to slip in there real quick. Oh, you know what? Go ahead. If you've got a response, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think it seems obvious when you talk about it. I think doing it is way harder though. Like knowing how to step back and developing the experience that you now have to know, okay, well, here's the way I would go about it now. It's a different approach. It's a different set of steps, probably, that takes experience. And, those kinds of things are not talked about nearly as much.
Yeah.
It's, that's not the kind of stuff that is sexy and drives, quick conversations and all these things that people are trying to do. It's like, that's the hard work. There is no, quick, way to leapfrog and do these things. Because if there was, that would be the norm. That's just the way everybody would do it, and there's a reason why design thinking goes through kind of a systematic process of really connecting, through empathy and other, levels with people to design better products and services. It's our understanding of it, I think, has grown as far as scope and scale, but the foundation of it, it's not like it's changed. It's a continued pursuit of understanding human behavior and what motivates us and inspires us and what keeps us up at night. And we have to, that practice is never going to go away. I'll never be done. The second I stop being a learner is the day I should be, out of the industry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was going to mention, and it just occurred to me after all this conversation about design thinking and all these things, is that just for clarity's sake, people may not know what we're talking about digital products.
Sure.
So, it makes sense to me that we're talking about, probably websites, applications, things like this. But do you mind actually explaining what kind of project might be a digital product? And then maybe we can get into a little bit about where we would start if we wanted to do that.
Yeah, no, important definition for sure.
Yeah, sorry. It just occurred to me after all that I was like, you know what? We may be totally off base.
Yeah. So the way I would look at it is there's external products, so branded products that your customers might use, whether it's B2B or B2C. And there's internal products that are for employees, driving the employee experience and modernizing the business. And those, when you think of like a website, which is I think is the easiest one, when you have a public facing website, most websites for companies start as brochures, right? Here's what we do, here's what we offer. As soon as a website becomes part of your product or service delivery, it becomes a product. It becomes essential to your business. And the way that we think about that website, the way that we design, manage, and execute on that needs to change. So I think a really easy example, especially now that everyone can relate to, is for healthcare, right? That website is now helping you find physicians. Are they accepting patients? Do they take my insurance? Can I schedule an appointment? Maybe I'm able through the website to log in and get my medical records, test results, et cetera. That's part of providing critical healthcare, right? Maybe it's tying into telehealth, which is, huge right now. That is not a brochure anymore. That is a critical product that any healthcare organization is providing to their community to provide critical care in diagnosis and treatment of health conditions. So to think of it just as a website anymore is just a huge underserving to that organization. And it sets up those teams for failure, because then we're holding them accountable to marketing metrics, which are only one small facet of the entire scope of that product. So then the same thing applies whether you're looking at mobile applications or IoT-based products as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, thank you for that. I think that makes a lot more sense, and will sort of help, dovetail nicely into this question. So where does a business, need to begin if they decide they want to try and build out some new digital product? It's occurred to them their brochure website's not cutting it. They need to do something new, offer a new service, or to do something internal, whatever it is. Where would a business start?
Well, I think it goes back to what we're talking about, is we can't skip the step of having a foundation in place. So we really need to start with that strategy. So if they go, when they say, hey, okay, I'm going to shift from this website, we're moving into the product space, why are they doing that? What's the problem for the business, and what problem are they solving for the end user? What is going to make that valuable? So one example of that right now is a lot of organizations are looking at how do they provide more self-service opportunities, right? Or others are looking at how do they move from more retail-based to, e-commerce, as another example, because of the current COVID situation. This was happening all pre-COVID. It will continue to happen post-COVID, but it's really amplified this right now and shifted companies' focus on what their strategy should be. So making sure they understand that and understand their users is the foundation of being able to start to make that shift. And one of the ways that you can look at that is, what are the jobs to be done on the website for your user? Is it to educate them? Is it to allow them to make that purchase? Is it customer support, or is it self-service? What does that look like? That has a lot of different layers to it that are really important. So making sure you have that foundation first, the diagnostic. Second is really understanding, well, what approach do we need to take? Every business, whether you're, a solo entrepreneur or, Fortune 500 company, you have limited time and resources and people, and you got to look at what skills you have and what skills you don't. And those capabilities are really going to determine which approaches you can take and what you can't. And I always recommend that, especially if you're stepping into this, is really to take the time to understand the core of, what approach can guide you to success. How can you incrementally get there? And sometimes it's leveraging a platform that pre-existing, like Shopify, or maybe selling through Amazon is the right approach. But if you're doing large scale goods or like an industrial solution or healthcare, you can't resell through, those third-party platforms. You're going to need to think about how you own that product or service and what that looks like. And that's going to be really important.
So is that step, that whole strategy step, could a person or an organization come to you at that point and help? And is that part of the process that you work through with them, is helping them develop that strategy, or should they come to you with something prepaid?
No, a lot of times, either or. A lot of times clients will come to us and be like, we know we have a problem. We need to make sure we really understand the scope of that problem and what approach will be appropriate for us. So they'll come in and we'll help them develop that strategic foundation. And then from there, develop the approach to how they should think about developing that, customer experience, and how they should approach the technology investment from the ground up. In other cases, they've already got they've done their homework. They really understand the root causes of their challenge. They have great insight about their customer, and there's one facet to their digital product or service that's really they're struggling with. Or, and so a common example is, I'm getting I'm getting a lot of customers, but they're only sticking with us for a few months. So why are they churning? What's happening there? And so we'll look at, usually, let's understand what the cause of that symptomatic issue is. What's really happening behind that? What's driving the behavior? Is it the product isn't really solving their problem? Is it maybe there was a bad onboarding experience, so they don't really understand the value of the product? There's a lot of different ways that we can look at that. And so we focus on the creative aspect of what's driving the behavior, going back to design thinking to help them diagnose that and then figure out a path forward.
So in the design thinking process to determine what's causing that, how do you figure that out? Do you bring clients in and just watch them as they go through the website, or are there techniques that you can use to kind of analyze what the user's doing?
Absolutely. I apologize. My dog I'm going to close my office door here, guys. So
not a problem. We both Ryan and I have dogs that will interrupt the show occasionally, so it's okay.
Yeah, I actually have to lock the door. We're in here, especially now that we're working from home most of the time. We've got I have to keep the door locked because my dogs will just nose their way in. So
yeah. Well, I don't have a lock on this door yet. It's work from home is something to get used to. But to answer your question about how we diagnose it, I think, the most important thing is a lot of times we start by mapping the current state. So if it's not really clearly documented, that's the very first place to start to diagnose something. So, do you have a clear picture of the customer journey? Do you have a clear picture of how they're using your product? And then what we'll do is we'll look at where the problem is and we'll try to go backwards. And what's the first moment that would help mitigate that outcome that you're not liking, right? That's causing that issue. So again, just using the example of I have high churn. Was there an onboarding experience? Have we set the customer up for success as they, came into using our product or service? Yes or no? And we can start to systematically then diagnose, well, where is the point of failure? And we can then reinforce that by doing, contextual inquiry, observational research, or, and working with our clients' customers to really understand, what is working and what's not working. And we can start to set up a continuous roadmap of improvement that will really help them start to address these product issues and then drive the business outcomes. Mm-hmm. And I think one thing to really highlight here is that we differentiate at this point the difference between a user outcome and a business outcome. And sometimes these things get pretty muddy for people. They focus on, well, we need to reduce churn, we need more revenue. Okay, well, the product team doesn't control revenue. Revenue is a lagging indicator that's driven by a bunch of other things the organization might be doing. But we're asking the product team to focus on solving this problem. So we really want to stay focused on user outcomes and understanding how that behavior ties to the business outcome and not getting those two things confused. And when we can do that, we're able to drive, actionable plans for continuous improvement much more effectively.
Interesting. Yeah, we had a guest on a while ago. He's more in the SEO sphere, but he would do A/B testing and have different landing pages and try it this way for, out of every 5 loads, it does this, out of every 5 loads, it does that. And he was able to boost, it was Damon Burton, I think was his name. But he supposedly for a few of his clients, he was able to really increase their revenue just by doing A/B testing and figuring out fail points in the site. And that's why I asked that. I was just kind of curious if you.
Well, A/B testing is a great tool set. I mean, we use that when it's appropriate. We'll do, rapid prototyping sometimes to, look at, okay, well, this is how you've architected this, but what if we think about this in a different way? And it's all, again, it's kind of like, if you have somebody who knows how to build a house, they have a toolbox and they know all the right tools for the right job. And we kind of come in the same way with our clients. It's like we have a giant toolbox of, design, methodologies and tools and approaches and technologies, but what's right for that situation? What's the right tool based on, budget, timeline, the problem that we're trying to solve. And then we come in with those, as appropriate. And it also is trying to match that or mirror that to what are the internal capabilities of our client. So if our client has an amazing development team that can quickly do prototyping, then our job is to really focus on the business and the user experience side of things. And we'll hand that off to them to run these prototypes. In other cases, we're facilitating all of it. And it just kind of depends on, the magnitude and scope of the problem and what resources are available.
So can we talk a little bit about, and I think we probably already addressed a couple of these, but what are the biggest pitfalls that people run into when they're, developing a product or a service? I mean, obviously we've beat strategy into the ground, but are there other big things like that are sort of easily avoided if you just know to avoid them?
I think so. I mean, there's, we talked a little bit about this too. This goes right hand in hand with strategy, and I'll jump off of this, but it's not knowing your user or your customer, and just very simple definitions too. Like, my user may not be my buyer, right? Something that simple can be profound in changing the way that you look at, a solution. So, I read a great, story about Box and how they realized, their users drive adoption of their platform, but they're not their buyers. So what they do is, they remove the paywall altogether so that they could allow more users to, adopt their solution. And then eventually they have a whole team using it, and they go to their boss and say, hey, we're really using this thing. Our productivity is going way up. Can I have your credit card? Great, easy. I mean, the product's already embedded. It's in their workflow. It was really insightful for Box to understand how businesses are using that and the difference between who uses the product versus who's paying for the product. So I think, having that insight is really important. Other really common pitfalls, though, that we see that drive just blatant internal sabotage is falling into, small traps like this whole methodology of fail fast, fail often. Experimentation is really important, but the concept, when adopted by management, of fail fast, fail often without being grounded that it's a methodology towards experimentation, can be very dangerous. It can be cancerous in a product team if it's not carefully understood, where you're wasting tons of time and money. It's a way to incrementally get better. And those kinds of things can be really disruptive. And we see that happening a lot. Or really, people, when they talk about Agile, really just wanting faster waterfall. And they're not really set up to collaborate. We're not comfortable, with that kind of process because that's not really how companies budget and plan a lot of times, right? Some executive wants certainty and wants a plan, but you don't even know the solution. Right? And that happens all the time. And I think creatives are really challenged to figure out how to help, people who aren't, from a creative background or in the business of creativity, to really understand how that works, right? We want to be able to say, I need this, and give me an absolute, right? Because it provides security. And I think especially during times right now when there's a lot of uncertainty, people are seeking more and more certainty. But we have to let creatives do what they do best, which is creatively solve problems. So that's another one that I think is that's kind of macro level stuff. Internally wise, I think it's really important to understand things like being aware if you have siloed knowledge, just acknowledging it for what it is. We work in silos in our organization. How are we going to break those silos down for the success of this product or service? Or, what are the steps? Acknowledging the steps that you don't know, and that's going to be very difficult. That takes, a pretty high level of, what we call conscious competence in an organization to recognize that breakdown. Other things would be no shared understanding. We talked a little bit about common language. One of the biggest ones that really comes out to the forefront, though, is organizational complexity. And so here's what I mean by that is when you have two people working on a project together, there's only 2 degrees of communication taking place. If you add a third person to that team, you now have 6 degrees of communication taking place. And if you add a fourth, you have 12. So you have this, multiplier that keeps happening. And so if you have a, business that's developing a product and there's 10, 20, 30 people involved in the project, you have an incredibly complex series of communications and expectations management that you have to facilitate to be successful. And that is, if that's not managed correctly, you're not really helping people unlock their capabilities to work on the problem. They're managing communications and reports and meetings and all these things just to keep people aligned. So when we talk about alignment, we can streamline and have a huge impact on the efficiency and performance of a team and helping people do what they do best by addressing some of those things up front, and not letting them, show up as a problem later in the process.
So as we start to explore these internal facets of digital products, can we talk about how internal digital products and services will empower employees or can empower employees? So, we just sort of talked about how, Box had decided, or gotten into all these systems, and then it was actually the people in the, in the groups or within the organizations who were then going to a manager or whatever and looking to buy it. That might be one example of a digital product working more internally than externally. We spent a lot of this conversation talking about, handing digital products off to a consumer or something. So, but can we maybe flip the script a little bit and talk about that other aspect, the sort of the internal purposes for digital products?
Yeah. So I think, today, right now, when we think about internal products, we're thinking about, we use the term operational agility, right? It's really the company's ability or capacity to seize an opportunity to improve the way people, process, and systems work together. And how does that align with the overall business model? Or another way to think about it is how adaptive can the organization be to change, right? And adjusting to change, whether internal or externally, is being driven. And so when we think about these internal tools, or that we're products that we're creating, we're looking for opportunities of where we can streamline things. And so one really easy example is the use of things like Excel spreadsheets. So if you have a team and you got a bunch of people and they're all using the same type of spreadsheet all the time to fill in information or complete some sort of process or system you've designed in your business, each one of these is living in its own silo, right? There's very little, version control is manual. There's no shared intelligence or being able to replicate processes. These different spreadsheets aren't talking to each other per se. In building, a really systematic way for people to collaborate. So we see a lot of times, these kind of, larger organizations, they're taking, hey, we do all of this work manually. And then we all of a sudden want to run this report, or we want to create this thing and we can't because it's fragmented. And so building that tool is empowering employees, by bringing together all of this cumulative process and intelligence together. And so that becomes really, really powerful. Another way is, maybe there's the idea of, I want to create right now, one of the things that's really big is how can technology or internal products help bring employees back to the office space or to campuses? What does that look like? Well, one of the most critical roles of digital product for employees, especially mobile at this point, is to promote employee safety, making sure employees feel heard and are understood. And that can take a lot of different forms. So a mobile app with, the right technologies implemented could allow us to say, hey, I see this area, it's not clean. It doesn't feel like a safe place to work. Or maybe it's a way to push communications to employees and let them know about, new policies and things in real time. And, these are all sorts of different attributes that can be considered. I mean, the number of internal tools is fairly, endless, but I think what you're looking for is what are the things that we do again and again and again that is, wasted energy and time. And if we could build this internal product, we could really lean into the potential of our people and their capabilities much more instead of them being bogged down by busy work.
Do you have any insights? Sorry, Mike, I've just got one question to follow up on that. Do you have any insights on when does it make sense to build something internally versus, I don't know, using like a Slack for chat? Like when would I decide to build my own Slack?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes into just an analysis. It goes back to, again, diagnosing the problem. How often is this problem coming up? What's the frequency and what's the impact or cost of that every time you have to address it? If it's, and there's a lot of times it just doesn't pencil out, quite candidly. But the larger, the organization, the more frequent, an issue might come up. Sometimes it pencils out pretty quickly as well. So you might have entire teams of people that exist purely because of this issue, or series of issues. And that if the technology was there, you would have, an extra whole team of people to do incredible work in improving the business, that would be really powerful. I think the other thing that is really important with internal products is realize that internal products usually drive your ability to innovate the customer experience. So if you think about it, it's kind of two sides of the same coin. You have customer experience on one side and employee experience on the other. And if we have these tools, we're able to unlock, a lot of potential innovation and creative possibilities for the organization. And so, that tends to be a big, meaty problem. Our data is siloed, and data needs to be thought about as how to, instead of it being siloed, how can it move seamlessly upstream and downstream through the organization? And that's incredibly empowering for employees, but it also unlocks incredible innovation opportunities for the end customer. Using Uber or Lyft, whichever your favorite rideshare, service is a good example, right? You've got a user app, you've got a driver app, and you've got a middleware that without the two things wouldn't work. So, we have conversations sometimes with, people, and they're like, well, I've got this great idea. It's going to be the next Uber of XYZ. And you're like, well, that's great. The app is the easy part. That's super easy. We can do that. No problem. What you need to do to make that work is what happens behind the scenes. And if we can't operationalize it, what you want to build in the app doesn't matter. And that's really where the complexity and the opportunity lies, I think. And that's really where a lot of industries right now are just starting to see what's possible. And if they build some more of these internal products, they can also become huge differentiators in their industries.
So I kind of want to take a little turn here and talk about how COVID has kind of affected your business and not being able to go into work and having everyone remote, and the communication breakdown that might happen in the development side of things, because you got your UX guy, you got your designer, you got this guy over here, and having them all spread out so far and not being able to actually communicate face to face. Has that had any problems in your business? Or is it just business as usual because Slack's the norm nowadays?
We're very fortunate. I mean, we've been used to, working remote for years before this, happened. So, that idea of remote collaboration is not new for Emerge, which, has been a blessing right now. It was a pretty seamless transition to needing everybody to work from home. I think the other thing that has really helped us specifically is we broke down our team silos through the product development lifecycle many years ago. So, engineering is not at the end of the process. They're actually part of the UX design process. They're part of the strategic process, just like design is part of the product strategy process with technology in there. So there's a common, we've taken our own medicine. We work really hard to build a common language, a common understanding, and make sure that's reflected in how we create a team to solve problems for our clients. Now, is there still challenges? Yeah, we miss getting into a room and whiteboarding things out and, just being able to, read off of each other. But it's been a fairly painless transition for our company, being that we've done this for so long. And a lot of our work with clients is remote. So that part really hasn't changed much. We have clients all over the country, and from time to time, clients overseas. And we're doing all of that through, teleconference and, and Slack and, stuff like that. So minimal impact, but I definitely recognize how it's been a significant challenges for our clients and for some, others in the industry, because they haven't had that process or that infrastructure in place.
Do you find, as far as managing your remote teams, do you guys work with people from like all over the planet? Not to overgeneralize like engineers and stuff like that, but there's generally a lot of cultural diversity across engineering teams. They tend to come from a lot of different walks of life. I mean, how do you guys, as a fully remote operation or as a company that works largely remote, how are you managing sort of cultural differences and different communication practices, things like that within your organization?
Well, I mean, all of us on the management team are really focused on listening. And first of all, right? It's first just listening. What are your needs? What are the expectations? Just like good design thinking, right? Don't walk into a situation with assumptions, right? Just try to listen and ask really good questions. We've adopted that into our management practice. One of my philosophies or goals is to be a servant leader. I work very, diligently to think about how can I serve the employees at Emerge and support them doing the best work possible. I'm here for them. They're not here for me. So it's really important that, we do that proactively so we can also, help build bridges, think about policy changes, be mindful of, stresses that, people are dealing with today, whether it's having kids at home, dogs barging into the office unexpected, when you're in the middle of a call. So it's understanding those dynamics and just being, really respectful. This is definitely not business as usual. It's, being able to be, really listen and empathetic and understanding, what are those differences. I can't say that I can put myself in the shoes of a lot of people. So I need them to tell me what they need. And if they're not comfortable telling me, then I'm going to be, bold enough to ask them and say, I don't know, help me understand. What do you need to be successful now? And, some people, for example, have, elderly parents. It's like they have kids and parents they have to take care of right now under this circumstance. Their work schedules are different. So, how do we think about flex work hours, or how do we think about, other circumstances to support each individual, and not just look at complete, an approach of blanket policy. And so we found those things to be really important.
Yeah, that's great. How do you overcome? I mean, I'm not exactly sure how big your team is, so maybe this doesn't happen a lot. But one of the things that's really common amongst remote workers is, sort of difficulty in sort of maintaining and building relationships with people within the organization. Do you guys do anything special for your remote teams? In terms of, do you do regular one-on-ones? Do you travel and meet together every so often? Do you do anything like that to sort of encourage, teamwork and camaraderie across the teams, even though they're remote?
Yeah, when travel was easier to do, we would have regular events in Portland where we would all come together. We have, annual events that we would always do, and, that are part of just our team culture and how we work together. We would, one of the things we used to be able to do, that has changed dramatically is, we would do an all hands on staff meeting every other week. And then right after that, we would go into providing team lunch where we would all sit together. That's from every facet of the company, right? We're coming together and we would, to break bread. And that was something that people really enjoyed. And then managers are, having regular one-on-ones. We're, doing, taking teams out to acknowledge, hard weeks and, and big and small wins. We would do these things continuously. That's certainly been harder now with the work from home. The one-on-ones continue. The remote happy hours are a lot of fun. But there's only so many happy hours you can do, and I think that right now what we're looking for is other ways to celebrate each other as we go forward. And, what we're really looking to is right now asking the team, what would you enjoy doing? Instead of just coming up with blanket ideas. But that is harder to do. It does make it a lot, more difficult when we can't, go out and have a few beers together. I can, sit across a table and hear how somebody's family is doing and what they're going through, and also acknowledge their work and determine the best way to also coach them and help them, be successful in their own career path, right? Emerge, as we're really candid with people, is just, one stop along a very long career. And we want them to leave the company when they choose to and be better off for it. So, having those proactive conversations is important and a little tougher right now.
Yeah. Well, we're kind of getting to that time, Jonathan. Can you tell our listeners where they can find you and what the best way to reach out if they want to work with you guys?
Yeah. So the best way to see what we're doing and connect with us is by going to our website, which is mergeinteractive.com. And also, please feel free for any of the listeners to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm active there and promoting content and other work that we're doing and insights from interviews and things that we're participating in all the time. And then specifically for listeners, I have a book that's coming out later this summer that covers a lot of the things that we touched on today, actually. And if they go to emergeinteractive.com/podcast, they can sign up. And when the book comes out, I'll send them a free copy.
Awesome.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan. I really appreciate all your time and everything today. It's a really great conversation, really insightful. And thanks so much to everybody who listened this week and listen to the show every week. Feel free to get in touch with us at eggscast.com, email our guests, and keep on, stay alive and stay healthy. Everybody do well out there. Thanks so much, Jonathan. Appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much.